Well, hello again. It's Carol King, the developer of Custom Home Builders Solutions, also known as CHS. In this video, we are going to talk about the basics of posting bank deposits in CHS. That's money that you've received and you've put into the bank. So let's get started with a little bit of introduction and previous things that you will need to have done before posting a bank deposit. So I'm going to click on the main menu, this Payers, Deposits, Receivables, and I'm going to click Bank Deposits to open this Bank Deposits menu. But first of all, I'd like to show you that if you put in the word deposit over here in the index and you click Bank Deposits, you're going to end up at the same menu. So if you don't want to do expanding lists, etc., you can make use of the index to get to where you'd like to go also. So this is the same window, and the first thing I'm going to do is click Help. And we've talked about in previous videos about setting up some deposit categories that you'll use and demonstrating how those are used when entering a deposit. But you need to first of all have your deposit categories set up and ready to go before you start your first bank deposit. Now this right here is posting a bank deposit, and the video that will be here is the one that I'm doing right now. But let's open the help document about that. And hopefully you've set up your browser so that it will open and ask if you'd like to open it with your PDF reader that you happen to have. Let's zoom in on this just a little bit. The window to post a deposit is generally used, of course, for posting monies received that increase your bank account. The main purpose is to post deposits to bank or cash accounts, but it can also be used to post interim loan draws that may not result in an actual cash deposit. This can happen, for example, when a lot draw is incurred but no cash is received. The posting of these zero deposits is described in separate help and on separate videos, but I do just like to mention that. You'll see that help on the deposits menu in just a minute. So we already did this thing about to open a new bank deposit, enter records to allocate the revenue side of the deposit entry to the appropriate payers, general ledger accounts, deposit categories, etc. Then select the cash account and date for posting the total deposit. The word job should be put in here too, to the appropriate job. Now let's take a closer look here at the deposit window for a second, where I'm giving an example of posting an interim draw. I'm not going to go over all of this, but what I'd like to point out is when it opens, it's going to ask you for a payor. And a payer in CHS is anybody that pays us money. We just called it payor because it could be a home buyer, a lender, just some random person, the owner putting in an owner contribution, that type of thing. It's also going to ask you for a job, which may drop in depending on if this payer is attached to a job, and a department, which may drop in based on the job that you have selected. So it's going to ask for those three things, and it's going to ask for a bank account, and it's going to show you a list of accounts on your chart of accounts that you've marked as cash accounts. So I want to talk about that just a minute, how you're going to need all those things ready to go before you start a new deposit. So back on the home main menu, let's first of all talk about how it gets its list of bank accounts for you to select from, and that's on the chart of accounts. So let's open it. What I'd like you to notice at the top of this person's chart of accounts, there are some various accounts check marked as a cash account. Now it is these that are check marked as a cash account that will show up in your drop down for selecting which cash account. So before you start doing deposits, you need to make sure you have your chart of accounts set up, watch the help about it, and that when you edit or add a new one, you select yes, that it is a cash account, if you want it to be showing up in the list. Now the other thing on the home menu is that you are going to need to select whoever gave you the money, which is called a payor. And to set up payers and buyers lists, you use payers and buyers list and setup, and then you use the button for add new payer. So be sure you get that set up before you open the deposits window. And the other thing I mentioned is, since we are in a job costing program that is tracking everything by job, you're more than likely, a lot of times when you're entering deposits, you're going to need a job. So on the home, I did jobs list and setup and open jobs list, and you can add a new job here and watch all the videos about adding jobs and everything about jobs. You can attach like departments to the jobs that will drop in, You can see how certain buyers are here, which are payers, actually set up as payers attached to jobs. So if I select, one of these payers, the job associated will drop in when I'm on the deposits window. One more thing is when I mention departments, the place that you set up departments is over here under Chart of Accounts and Departments. And get your departments set up. You might have a spec department, a custom home department, a property management department, or who knows, but you just add new departments and you can watch the help about that. I just wanted to mention that the deposit window is going to ask for all of those things, and it's going to look to those places to give you lists to select from when you enter a new deposit. So let's get going and let's get back to the deposit, add new deposit window. And notice how the bank deposits menu is now opened up here in a tab. So if I go home and I just jump off to some other random thing, the jobs list now gets opened. And if I want to leave it open, and I just go back to the bank deposits menu. Okay, this is called a menu. It has various things that you can do about deposits, like edit or delete them, look at detail behind them. In other videos, we've talked about how you can post deposits, prior period deposits that are ones from before you got CHS. Mostly, you'll be using the Add New Deposits, but if you haven't set up your deposit categories, watch the help and be sure you do those first, because that is another thing it's going to ask for when you enter a new deposit. Now, you'll notice it's very complex to be a home builder, that we have some special help about posting 0 lot draws on the deposit window, and help for when you're closing a job and you get those big HUD papers, and how to post that closing check that you get, but we're not going to do that. This is the basics of entering basic deposits in this particular video. One thing though that I'd like to mention, if you get some refund from a vendor, a check, you might be tempted to come to the deposits window to enter that. But actually CHS likes to track things by vendor, and vendors are people that you pay money to, your trades or suppliers. So if you click this, you're going to get some instructions about how to go and enter that as a negative amount, which will show up as a deposit on the Add New Payables bills, or a bunch of entries. Anyway, there's whole big tutorials about that. So therefore, you won't be posting generally vendor refunds on the deposit window. Also, you might be opposite of that, tempted if you're posting some refund to your home buyer or your customer. You're probably going to be setting up that payer to be a vendor also, and doing that on the payables window. Just wanted to get that out of the way right up front. And we will get started adding a new deposit and talking about the fields on the deposit window. One more thing before we get started adding a new deposit I'd like to mention is let's say you deposited a deposit and for some reason the bank returned it as NSF, non-sufficient funds, or whatever. You can either go use some tools to delete the original deposit, or if you'd like to keep a trail of the in and out of that deposit, you can add a new deposit, and when you do the amount of the deposit, you do a minus amount, and then that will be taken away from your checking account. You'll kind of see how all of that works, but that way you'd have a trail of, and you could put a description of check returned NSF and use the same job and department and everything you did when you posted the original deposit. Just like to mention that's you would come back to the Add New Deposit window to post a returned check. So let's get busy. Add new deposit. Let's first of all do something very simple and decide that the owner of the company is adding a deposit to the account that has nothing to do with the job. It's just an owner contribution. So the owner of this company is James Randall. Notice that when I selected James Randall, the job just stayed at the H job, which is our generic H job, meaning no job, and the department OH that's attached to the H job is here for overhead, which is fine. And we're not going to talk about the accounts receivable or a change order right now. We're just doing a very simple deposit. So let's put James Randall. I like to do good descriptions, owner, contrib, right here. And I set up a deposit category. Please, again, watch the videos about setting up deposit categories, and you can set up new ones right here by using that little icon to the right of it and watching Help About It. But I set up one called Owner Contribution, and on the Deposit Categories window, I said if I select that, I want it to go to the GL account Owner Equity, so that dropped in for me. Let's just say he's putting in $30,000. This is an optional field, the check number field. I'll just put in some check number, but you could put that in for reference. You can also upload various things to be attached to this record. And one thing, maybe you want to upload the copy of the check, but let's not talk about that right now. If you'd like to see a list of other deposits by the payer, James Randall, you can see various things going on and other owner contributions and stuff like that, everything that's happened with that particular payer, and that's this link right here that became active as soon as this wasn't empty. So that's all you need to do for that part of that deposit. You have a deposit total of $30,000. And remember what I said about what would be in the list of bank accounts would be accounts on your chart of accounts checkmarked as cash accounts. In this case, we're putting into the operating account. And you can select whatever day you deposited that at the bank. Quite often it's today that you put it in. And CHS will drop in a deposit ID number that's based on the last ID number plus adding a 1 to it. But if you have some deposit IDs system that you're using, you can type one in. CHS will object to it if it's a duplicate of a previous deposit ID. All of the big journal entry that occurs that CHS makes from this will be batched together by this deposit ID. But before we leave this window, let's learn a little about what's at the end of this line. One is to delete this row in case I decide, oh, I didn't want to do that one. Or I could copy this one in case I need to do something else that has a lot of the same similar, or he gave us a check for something else, so that a lot of this would drop in for me. You'll see me doing that on another example here in a minute. Or you can just add a new line. Now what I'm going to play like is that I owe James Randall something. So we'll say King Carol. That's me. And it still kept the H job, and let's say it's my check number 6789. And I want to talk about accounts receivable, this field right here. We're going to come back to talking about the job and department. Now I can take a look at all accounts receivable that are open for me if I'd like to. The reason to look at them is that it's very important that the job and the department match the accounts receivable. So if I had a job in there and no receivable for that job, when I do the drop-down list for accounts receivable, it won't show up. But I can see that there's $25 that I owe from some test thing, so we'll just use that. $25. Don't pay attention to these dates, who cares? Those are old things from demos, and I'll just get this one cleared out by saying I want an H and OH department. So that's fine. So what will show up in here is all receivables that have a job and department of H and OH. If a receivables that you expect to be there is not in the drop-down list, you might look at this big list of receivables and see what job or department you need to change it to in order for it to be in the list. But you can see that I have a balance due of $25, so I checked that accounts receivable, selected that I mean. You hover over things, it'll explain that about the job and department. See how it's explaining it there. But it dropped in the $25 for me. The other thing it did when I selected accounts receivable invoice is it forced the GL number for accounts receivable, the control GL account number, to be here. That's because you won't be entering it to some other general ledger deposit on accrual basis, because you did that when you created the accounts receivable invoice. It got to the proper place. Maybe it's an invoice for some little sales or something you're collecting or reimbursing some office supplies. So when you posted the AR invoice, you gave it the GL number that the credit needed to go to. So when you're posting on the deposit window and you select an AR invoice, it's going to force this GL number. And if I want to do another deposit category, some random something to identify it for a list of deposits, I can. We'll leave this one at miscellaneous because it's just a random thing, maybe seeking reimburse office supplies. So now we have $3,025. Maybe we put these checks both on the same deposit slip. So those are some basics not related to a job, just the generic H overhead job that I wanted to show you and how you do an accounts receivable invoice. If I am doing a brand new deposit and I don't have an accounts receivable invoice yet, so I'm putting the deposit in before I go make the receivables invoice, you can use this button right here to supply a new AR invoice number to that, and then you would hopefully go make your new accounts receivable invoice with that same invoice number. You can also read help about that. If I don't want this to be an accounts receivable entry anymore, I can clear the AR invoice, and like you saw, I could look up all accounts receivable invoices for the payer that I selected here. So I've entered this, and let's see what happens if I blank out the deposit date. And let's put some random character in here, like let's just put a caret, a weird character. And let's try to submit this deposit. Notice that it says the data was not submitted because there are validation errors in some fields and that they've turned red. You can see that here. If I hover over it, it's telling me that the only special characters allowed are a period, comma, underscore, hyphen, parentheses, amp sign, number sign, etc. But this caret sign is not one. So I'm going to click in here and remove that. It stays pink until I submit it again. And it's saying we have to have a deposit date. You cannot leave any of these blank because it has to know things. You cannot leave most of this stuff blank. If it's not being used, you'll have a none in here, or a 0 in here for accounts receivable, or a generic H, that kind of thing. The only thing pretty much that you can leave blank is the check number, because that is optional. So let's go ahead and select today's date again, and let's submit this deposit. After you submit it, CHS is going to tell you the resulting cash balance in the cash account that you chose to post the deposit to, and if you'd like to review those posted deposit records, you can. If you happen to forget that you did want to upload a copy of a check or something else to attach to it, you can do that right now with the upload icon. So you can see the entry that was made for $30,025 if you'd like to. We are going to do another video that has to do with deleting and using the various detail type buttons. What I'd like to do now is post a new deposit that relates to a job and getting an interim draw. So I'm going to select Smith John as our payer, and as soon as I did that, the job Smith John dropped in. If I look here at the job setup, you can see how I have that payer Smith John attached to this job. So if that payer is only attached to one job, CHS will drop for convenience the job that it's associated with so that you don't have to select the job. If this is related for some reason to some other job, you're certainly welcome to select a different job. It also looked to see what department is connected to the Smith John job, and you can see up here how that department is selected for that. So it dropped that in also. Let's pretend that this is check 7894. And in this example, we're actually going to play like it's a wire transfer. So you could even do that. Let's type that in here. And we're not doing an accounts receivable invoice, but we may be doing something about a change order here. And I would like to go over, before we talk about the rest of these fields, is that we're about to post some monies we received for a draw request. And if you'll look here, you can see a link for looking at the various draw requests for this job. This is a list of draw requests that you have sent out, and we have received a check for this second draw. But what I'd like to do real quickly is make sure there's no change order monies received on that draw. I can open the draw document right here, open the stored draw request that we did, so I can review it while I'm on the deposits window, and I'm going to take a look at what we were drawing for. And you can see that in this draw. You can see amounts here. So let's just kind of look, and this is part of the draw that we did, but if you'll look over here, if I go up to see the titles, you can see that there's some change order money here, 3375, and that this draw is just drawing 3375. So you don't have to give them a change order and then collect just the money for that change order from them, which you can do, and just get a check for whatever the written up amount of the change order is. But what you can do is also include it in your draw request. This is a cost plus builder fee draw request, so that you can just go ahead and collect the money for that change order before you're ready to collect all the money for framing labor. Maybe there was some real little framing labor done for the sun porch first, which is weird, but pay no attention to that. And if you look throughout the rest of what's being drawn, this one is $1,500. All of this adds to $48.75, and a builder fee was added, and there's the total of the draw. But this one is not related to a change order. So let's take a look at something else. When it's a cost plus type draw, this is cost plus fee, you can look at the cost detail. You can look at what costs were marked as drawn on the draw. Most of the time for cost plus fee, you would just look at the costs only. But I'd actually like to look at the actual costs and marked up, because I'd like to see how much they're paying for the change order. In other words, the actual cost that we posted was $3,375, but in that field, in that bill, CHS looked to see what the markup was on the change order, and the marked up amount was $42,1875. So we're going to put in $42,1875 as a change order, and over here it notates that's Smith John 01. Now the only way this will work is when you do change orders, you attach a purchase order to them that's a change order purchase order. Otherwise, CHS can't really know whether this particular cost entry, when you post it to payables, was a change order cost. So there's videos all about doing that. But we can, on the deposit screen, say $42,1875 was done for a change order 01. So let's go ahead and export that to PDF so we can keep that kind of out there for reference, and open it. So I just want to keep it so that I can re-access it. It's now in my taskbar. And let's close this. So we realize that this draw that we just received, part of it was for change order 01, but not the whole amount that CHS just dropped in. But when you select and drop down, it'll look for all change orders for this job. But we know that it's the one we labeled 01, so I'm doing that. And what I'm going to do is say Smith partial payment CO1 in draw 2. So it dropped in the change order category and said which GL it would like me to post it to. But in this case, I actually really want to post it to interim draws because it's part of an interim draw. And you'll just have to be aware of that it's going to construction loans payable, but our description will help us know about this, and this will get marked on change order summary lists as a certain part of it was paid. Now let me open that and see what that amount was. $42,1875. I'm going to put the marked up and say that's what they're paying us for that change order. So now I really would like to copy this line so that I don't have to select Smith John and wire transfer. And now I want to put balance of draw 2 in the deposit category interim draw again, and the GL number dropped in for me for interim draws. Let's go back and look at our interim draw again and see what the total amount was. $609,534, and that looks right. So let's do, most all computers have a little calculator. Let's go ahead and close this. Let's get the 609,534 in here. Close that. And let's use our calculator again to subtract $42,1875, the amount we put in for the change order. So we did that, and I'm going to highlight over this and do Control-C to copy, and I'll close that. And right here, I'm going to put that amount in. So you can see that the total of the deposit with those two lines is $609,534. Now the reason for separating this is because there are reports that you can print that show how much has been received for each change order on the change order screen to get them marked off as really having been paid. But the complication comes in home building business is that we also do cost plus draw requests, which are drawing all the costs. But there is a method, if you attach a PO to a change order, to separate those out so you can mark those change orders as having been received from the payer. So we're just wanting two lines so that we can tell ourselves that this goes to change order number whatever, and this one does not. So if that makes some sense, I'd like to also complicate this and pretend that the bank actually took out $45 for a wire fee because this was a wire transfer. I want to do that because I want to show you a couple of other things about how you can post that $45 as a job cost for this job. Let's do draw to, let's change our description to draw to wire fee. Now what we want to do is get that to job cost. So we select the job cost category here. It's explaining what's going to happen, and I'm going to explain that. The GL number that we attach to the job cost deposit category for where we post our job costs dropped in. So that takes care of that. We're going to put a minus 45 here to lower the amount of the total deposit we received. And we're going to select a cost code we have on our cost codes master called overhead miscellaneous. That's what we like to put these kinds of things to. I mean, you can have a cost code for wire fees if you want. CHS looked and dropped in 25% since this is a cost plus, and actually this will get included on your next cost plus draw from the customer to get reimbursed for it. But anyway, this is how you get it where this particular line is going to show up on a job cost report, subsidiary job cost report, and not on a job revenues report. This is marking it to do that so that you can have this one on your job costs and the other two lines will be showing up as job revenues. So we're ready to post this. I hope that's not too confusing. It's just the way it is with all of those various things. If you just got a draw that didn't have any change orders in it and you're not worried about that, you'd have one line interim draw, put in the amount of the draw that you received as the check, and that'd be it, especially if there were no other things taken away from it. But because we are job costing, CHS is written to handle getting some costs, like if you get a lot closing with the HUD papers and they're taking out closing costs, you'll be using job costs and applying that to various job costs on your deposit window. Let's see if we've kind of addressed all of the various fields that we have here, and that help document that I showed you goes over all the various fields and what's required in the various fields. The other thing I didn't show you is that we can see a list of job revenues for the selected job. This deposit that we've done is not posted yet, so you can see we got draw 1, and that was very simple under interim draws and a down payment from them for that job. Now the things that are posted to job revenues are only things posted on the deposit window with a job code, except for ones that have specific deposit categories. And when we talk about job revenues, that will be explained further. So in this case, we're posting this to our construction checking. We can see it's a little less than the draw, but the draw will be totaled there and be okay. So let's play like this was actually, if you look at the draw requests, this was all happening in 2016 in my demo. So let's play, we got that on December 3rd or something in the year 2016. This is another thing I wanted to show you. It will let you know, I'm doing this video in 2021, and it will let you know that you made a date that is very old. So that in case you just made a boo-boo, this will help keep you go, oh my goodness, I put in the wrong date, and you can change it. In this case, we want to leave the date. The thing is also outside of our current period that we have set up for accounting. You need to open the company master to look at what you have set up for accounting, to change it for a current period. A current period is controlled by you just so that you get warnings or not. And you can mark to allow entries outside of the period. So this is going to let me make this entry. But on your company master, you can mark it as no, don't allow outside of whatever period that I have. What you do with your periods is quite often at the end of the year, you've closed your books, this and that, and you don't want anybody making any entries prior to the end of that year. You might make your current period be the following year from and to, and say no, don't allow anything outside that year. The accountant, top person, person with top level permission controls that. So we're ready to post this. Submit deposit. And again, we can view the posted entries. We might have uploaded something that has to do with this interim draw, but you can see we have 3 entries that are going through. One more thing I'd like to show accountants about deposits in CHS. Let's do this deposit totals. Cash side I already have put in this date, so we didn't have to take time doing it because I'm interested in the deposit I just posted in 2016. Let's open a list of deposits, just the cash side. There's another one where you can see all the detail lines. But I'd like to view the journal entry that CHS posted behind the scenes. Now you are entering a positive amount for the change order, a positive amount for the balance of the interim draw, but you can see that behind the scenes those have been put in as credits as far as the journal entry in your books. On the deposit window, we need it to be intuitive, so that you enter a positive amount, and I entered this 45 as a minus amount, but CHS posted it as a debit. In other words, it kind of reverses the signs when it posts it behind the scenes. That's so that the deposit window, when you're entering positive, and minus, can show at the bottom the right amount for what the deposit is that's going to the construction checking account. Just an explanation that behind the scenes, even though the deposit window you're kind of putting in a little opposite on your lines than you would post if you were just doing a journal entry, CHS is actually converting it into the right kind of journal entry for you behind the scenes. That's just a note for accountants so that you can see what's happening and how you can see the journal entry by opening this. If I drill down on the amount, another window will open to show me those 3 detail records that I entered, just because. If you need to delete a deposit that you just did, you can use the delete button right here, and it'll check for various things to see if it can be deleted. If you need to edit a deposit, you can use edit deposit batch, but we will do all of that in the next video. I wanted to get the basics, go over several things that can happen while entering a deposit, and let you know how to do it. So it takes a while because complex, again, the home building business. So thank you for watching.